Okay, so thanks for sticking around. We're going to put together the number 4 Stanley plane just to show the restoration process. It's pretty much identical between all of the planes. So I'll show you, as you've seen in the last video, we spray painted over the Japanning because that's a very tough process to do. There's still a bit of rust. Not sure that the plane is flat. I'm going to do a bit more work on the handles, polish up the brass. I'm going to show you basically what I've done to tune the plane up to make it operate as best as possible and look as best as possible. Don't know if you can see it in the video. This plane has a number of chips in it, so I'll fix that up, but I'll just show you briefly on this video. The next video I'll show you how I've sharpened all of the tools and what processes I use, but you will get a brief overview. We'll put the plane together and give this plane and a couple of the other planes a bit of a test. Okay, as you saw in the last video, I've used a vinegar and salt soak. I've dried them in the oven. There's still a bit of surface rust and a bit of oil. So I'll probably start with an acetone wipe just to clean this up. I'm not going to grind this, but I will use some 120 grit sandpaper on a known flat surface, which for me will be my table saw. It doesn't have a cast iron top. That would be ideal, but it's going to do to flatten this out and make sure it's flat. However, before we do that, we need to insert the blade, back it up so it's not protruding, and then put the whole plane under tension to make sure that it's flat as it will be used. Okay, so before we can put the plane together with the blade, as I showed you before, blade's got a number of chips. I'm just going to take them off on the grinder. Happy with the bevel? I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to measure it. However, what I will do is put the plane on and adjust my stop so that the blade bevel hits in the center of my white grinding wheel on about the correct angle. Okay, so I will loosen off my adjustable stand. We'll see if we can get this set up right. It's going to be at quite an angle, so this may take a bit of playing around. I'll just sight down it from the side and basically set it up so I'm happy. That looks about right there, so let me tighten it down and then give it another check. So, the more I look at this blade, I don't know if you can see that, it actually has 2 different kind of bevels. That's not for me sharpening it, it came this way. So let's assume that this bevel is going to be fine, set it up, and we'll start off. A method is to grind it straight across until you are happy, no chips, and then grind the bevel. I'm just going to grind the bevel because the chips aren't very deep. I'll give that a shot first. Okay, so here's my blade. It's certainly ground the bevel down on whatever angle I set it at, which I feel is pretty much the same. I got out most of the chips. It's not perfectly straight, but we'll clean that up in the sharpening process. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, for sharpening, I'm just going to use a 1000 grit stone to start. To clean up the blade, you can use one of these jigs or guides to make sure you have the angle. I'm not going to today. Just going to freehand it. For lubrication on this diamond stone, I'm just going to use some plain generic glass cleaner. Okay, So I'm going to start with the back, just flattening the back. Firm pressure across the blade. I'll rub it in a bit of a circular motion, and then I'll drag it flat across. Okay, and you can see from the shine, basically it's definitely flat, other than possibly right there, across the back, sort of 1/8, 16th of an inch of a blade. That's all that we need. And for any small bevel we may have created, we'll just, again, drag it flat across the diamond stone. Going to do the same to clean up this edge of the blade. I'm just going to hold it, feel for the bevel, even pressure on both sides of the blade, and go in a figure 8 pattern across the diamond stone. Figure 8 patterns really just not to wear out your stone as fast in one spot. No, other than dishing a wet stone or a water stone if you're using that. Straight back and forth is just fine as well. And that's what you'll end up doing if you use the jig. And I'm going to put this on the jig just to give you an idea of how that works. So set it up. Just going to slide the blade through on a flat surface like the diamond stone itself. We'll set the bevel. Use the lines on the jig to line up the blade to keep it square. Otherwise, you're basically grinding a new bevel angle with the diamond stone, which is fine in one way, but your blade won't be square, and we want the blade to be as square as possible at the end of the process. All right, so running the wheel along the diamond stone, a bit more lubrication. It's just back and forth. Trying to keep even pressure on both sides of the blade. And if I take a look, not perfect from the grinder, but we're getting there. You can see across the blade, still not 100% perfect. I'd like to get it as close as possible here on the diamond stone. So when I switch to the water stones, it's basically polishing and just sharpening the edge as sharp as possible. I'm not sure if you can see that little bit of a burr. You can definitely feel it. We'll go another few strokes and I'll show you how to get rid of that burr before we switch to the water stones. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the polish that the diamond stone has given. I can feel a burr on the back. So all I'm going to do is hold the blade flat and slide it off the stone to remove that burr, and it's gone. Sometimes you can see the burr come right off. In this case, you couldn't. So I'm going to keep the stone, correction, I'm going to keep the blade in its holder to make sure I am keeping the same bevel angle. I'm going to switch to the water stones. Okay, so I have a 3000 and an 8000 water stone. Haven't really been using the 3000 other than to rub the 3 and the 8 together to make sure the 8000 stone is flat. Although today I think I'll use both. So water stones, they've been soaked in water for 10 minutes. And basically the same process. I'm going to polish the black of the blade, which is a bit easier because this stone is higher, off the workbench. So just even pressure back and forth. Really just focusing on that last 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch of the blade right before the bevel on the back of the cutting edge. Okay. Again, figure 8 if you're doing this by hand, or back and forth. Figure 8 really just stops you from cupping your stone. Okay, we're getting a pretty good polish. You can see maybe I might have burnt the blade slightly. Hopefully it's okay. We don't have to regrind it. We'll see how we go. It's looking good so far. I'm not feeling a burr on the back edge yet, though. And one of the reasons is it takes a lot longer on these stones. This is 3000 grit. The diamond stone was 1000 grit. If for whatever reason you had to start from scratch on a very bad blade, you're using a 220 grit, you'd feel that burr very quickly. For instance, if you use sandpaper on a flat surface, like a granite stone or a cast iron workbench top, like on your table saw or your bandsaw. Okay, the stone's getting a bit dry. Oh yeah, I got a bit of a bevel that I can feel. The polish is coming out beautifully. Okay, so to finish this off, because I'm pretty happy, I'm going to just put pressure on one side of the blade. And give it 4 or 5 pulls, and then do the other side. And this will ever so slightly, really microscopically, put a rounded edge towards the edge of the blade, so the cutting all happens in the center of the blade. All right, so 8000 stone. This is going to finish it up. Let's just do a bit more polish on the back. This will also help with any burr that might have been forming. Definitely not there. Okay, let's just get into it. Because I know you came to this video not to watch me sharpen, but to watch the restoration, I assume, of some antique hand planes. There's lots of sharpening videos online. I watched quite a few before I started sharpening myself and before I bought anything. I love the water stones, and I think they're going to last as long as you maintain the flatness of the surface longer than the diamond stones. But at the lower grade, I like the diamond stones better than sandpaper or a stone itself if you have a really bad blade that you have to start from scratch from. These blades I plan on either leather stropping or just using the 8000 stone sort of every time I use them in the shop. It should only take 1 or 2 minutes, and you know, you can soak the stones for the 10 or 15 minutes while you're doing your work. End of the day, 5 minutes, sharpen the plain blade. It should be good as new. All right, so I got a bit of a hollow grind on the blade. I'm not sure if you can see that. But you see the polish is great, and it actually goes to the edge. And as I said, I wanted to round the edges a bit. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to switch now to a leather strop. Okay, leather strop, bit of polishing compound. Oops, let me get that back in the frame for you. I bought this strop, it was about $15, came with that. Works pretty good. I'm gonna keep it in its mount just so I don't screw up the bevel, although there's no need. Just give it a few pulls. When you use it in the shop, you can just strop your blade after some light use. No need to like resharpen every time. If you're putting them through some heavy use, you probably would like to resharpen. And again, if you keep them sharp, it only takes a minute or two. on either your highest stone or both of the water stones, or on diamond plate if that's how you choose. All right, so let's take a look at that. I think we got a pretty good mirrored finish. And other than this hollow ground here, I think this is going to be pretty sharp. So let's test that on a bit of hair. Okay, here's the blade. Just should shave off all the hairs, and it comes off easier than my store-bought razor. So that's great. This blade is ready to go. Okay, just quickly, some of the other things I'll do. I'm going to take the chip breaker. I'm going to try to grind it flat on the edge. Obviously, this doesn't need to be sharp, but the better it connects with the blade, and you'll see when we set up this number 4 plane, the better it's going to do its job, and the easier it's going to be to get those beautiful, thin, wispy shavings that most of us are seeking. Okay, so I'm getting a bit of cut along the edge. Sometimes you'll need to do this, flatten the chip breaker. It's definitely got a flat edge now. Just going to make sure I didn't put any burr on it. It's actually fairly sharp, not required, and there is a burr. I can feel the burr. I'm just going to pull off that burr. Yep. Okay, so flat, straight edge, a little bit sharp, which isn't required, but no burr anymore. I'll just strop this, first the burr side, and then the connection side. Really that's so I can get that little polished edge and see. I'm getting some hair from me testing that plain blade. Okay, other than a bit dirty, I've obviously ground down this chip breaker. You can see where a lot of the rust was in these pits. That's all right. It's clean, flat, and sharp along the edge. Same with the blade. Okay, so other things I want to do. Here's the frog. This part of the frog needs to sit flat and firm against here. I cleaned these up, and they're not perfect, but they're pretty good, with a grinder wheel, or a brass wheel on a drill actually. This part here also the blade sits on. So you can, I'm going to flatten it with the diamond stone a bit flatter to get rid of some of these, what I assume are a combination of surface rust and machine marks. This thing and this thing are going to get in your way. So basically, I can flatten this side, which is probably the most important side where the blade is sitting for the most part. Just doing that back and forth, even pressure on the diamond stone. This is a 1000 grit stone. You can see there how it's not 100% flat, but it is getting there. It's actually doing a pretty good job very quickly. The other thing to do, move your side to side lever out of the way. Do a few strokes on this side, and then switch and do the same on the other to keep the wear that you're giving to the frog even. So I've done that side. I'll swap sides here, do this side. About the same number of strokes. Again, I'm gonna have to wipe it off. So I could do this all the way down to perfectly smooth and flat. And am I? I'm gonna go a lot farther than it currently is. Let me give this a quick wipe. There, that's what it looks like now. I'm gonna go a lot farther to try to get into here so that the blade is flat all across it, because the blade sits on this side of the frog. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with just these edges here, as if it was a chisel blade or a plain blade. So that this sits evenly on its wearing surface inside the plain body. So I'm going to do both of those, And ideally I will do this part as well, because this also is a bearing surface for the plane. Okay, so that's getting there. It's probably about half done. You can definitely see the machine marks on it. So this plane, although it probably works awesome, could have been better just from day one from the factory, even though it's a very old original Stanley plane. Okay, so here's where I've got to. It's a bit dirty, although I haven't got into there or some of the ends. And you know what? That's all right. It's my plane. I'm happy with that. That's as far as I'm going. Same as here. Got a good bearing surface. And here is dirty, but it's similar. So I'm just going to wipe this down, clean it up, and we'll move on, because I'm happy with that for what I'm going to use this plane for. Okay, so what else have I done? As I said, obviously I used the wire brush on these to clean off surface rust. Same with this. Had a fair amount of surface rust, doesn't anymore. I removed what rust there was from here. I'm going to use a buffing wheel to polish this brass. I'm gonna buff this. I'm not sure what metal it is. It's close to brass. Maybe it's a bronze alloy. It's definitely different than brass and different from the rest of the plane. And same that, I'll polish it up. So these I already took 220 sandpaper to. They're very dirty now from me touching them. 220 sandpaper. Rub some orange oil on them several times, and then some paste wax. I'm going to clean them after I clean my hands. And I'm just going to paste wax them again, although I might re-sand this. Feels all right in the hand. Yeah, I'll probably just paste wax it. So what's going to happen? Going to buff these up. Just a normal buffing wheel, buffing compound. You don't need to see that. Then I'm going to assemble the plane and show you, one, how to make sure the plane body is 90 degrees or close, which is important if you use it as a shooting plane. At least flat here, which is important. And then how I'm setting up my blade after I do that. And then we'll do a final test to show you what I've done. So other than the circular plane, basically this is what I've done to every other plane. So we'll just use this Stanley No. 4 as the analog to show you guys what I've done. Quick setup, basically using a roll of 220 grit paper. I'm going to tape it down to my table saw table, which is the flattest thing I own, with a bit of duct tape. Put the plane together, back out the blade, and then we're going to basically sand the blade flat. Okay, it looks a bit dodgy. This does work. I'm just going to buff some of the brass parts before we put the plane together, and buff the some of the silver metal parts as well. Okay, so quick clean, bit of Windex to get rid of the grime. Also might get rid of some of the oils, although the next process will sand those oils off. So I'm going to give the body a quick wipe. It's been cleaned, painted, ground down, and then painted. It's pretty much good to go. May not use Windex on everything. Might just wipe off some of the polishing grime, so that's good. Unfortunately, I can never get into that part, but that's okay. If you really want it perfect, you could use some metal polish to bring it up. I don't need it to look brand new. I just also don't need it to look disgusting. Nothing wrong with having a beautiful tool. Maybe that will help you make a beautiful project. Okay, beautifully mirrored blade. Being careful to protect the blade at the edge and staying away from it. We'll just Give the rest of it a wipe, get rid of any residue from that little bit of buffing we did. Which really, I'm not sure if it works. I just think that the smoother this is all around, the less likely it is to get some surface rust. Okay, plane. Stanley No. 4. Early 1900s. Ready to assemble.